Great, so let's get started. Hello and welcome to the show. This is our second in our webinar series looking at why traditional services delivery is dead. If you haven't already downloaded our playbook and that's written about this topic, I recommend you do. It's free and expands on the concepts that we'll be exploring today. So with that in mind, I'll skip to the agenda of today. So we've got some brilliant content that'll be presented, framed around the companies, how companies are thinking differently about delivery and customer success in this era of outcomes, right from execution all the way through to value. And there'll be time for questions throughout, so please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And please, when you do that, address the questions to all rather than individual contributors so our moderators can answer them succinctly. But you didn't come to listen to me, so I'm going to move straight into introductions as we've got a lot of content to deliver today. So first, I'd like to introduce Adam Mays. Adam, welcome to the call.
Thanks, Robbie. So hi, everyone. I've got over 18 years experience in professional services. Started life as a fee earning consultant. I moved to a company called Detica in 2006 and took a secondment into business operations for what was then Detica's largest client account with 20 million revenues and 120 consultants on the books at its peak. Really enjoyed that. I moved over to another part of the business that was a product startup to help them scale their operations and their business, which gave me a really good intro into kind of software product businesses. Did that for just under 3 years. And in 2012, I moved to a technology consultancy called BJSS. So again, came in order to kind of help BJSS scale and grow and build the operational infrastructure to achieve the growth that they wanted to achieve. And over the period I was there, it was about 250 people when I started and just over 1,000 when I left, just 6 years later. So, and that was all organic growth. Since 2018, I've been working with my colleagues at Garwood Solutions, helping professional services businesses to deliver operational transformation projects, primarily based around PSA adoption.
Great, thank you. And we also have Mike Dohrmann on the call.
Hi, I'm Mike Dohrmann. I am Vice President of International Operations for Atlantic Technologies, which Atlantic is a professional services software consulting firm based out of Milan that was founded in 1997. We have about 220 consultants between Milan, Denver, and London. I've been working in the industry professional services for about the last 15 years, with the majority of my time focused heavily on Salesforce, most recently as an associate partner at IBM after the firm that I worked for, Blue Wolf, was acquired by IBM. So yeah, and I split my time between Denver and London, mostly Denver right now, just because they're not really keen on people getting on planes. So
Thank you very much, Mike. And last but not least, Pat.
Yeah, hi, Robbie. Hi, everyone. My name is Pat. I'm the Chief Customer Officer at GoCardless. We are a platform that allow customers to collect bank-to-bank payments globally and very simply, needless to say. We currently work with about 60,000 customers around the world, and we process in excess of 20 billion a year in transactions. So growing pretty quickly, and I've personally been involved in customer success, or way back before customer success was actually a thing, account management for the last sort of 20 years, and really kind of have evolved through that through various different organizations, primarily within the SaaS space. Companies like Brandwatch, Bazaar Voice, Marketing Technology, HR Tech, and now into FinTech. So nice to be here.
Thanks very much. So that's our speaker lineup. And as always, we've got Jonathan Corrie, Precursive CEO, on the line. Say hello, Jonathan.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Can hear you fine.
Great. I was having a few connection issues. Thanks everyone for joining. I'm Jonathan. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Precursive. First and foremost, thanks to our customers, Mike from Atlantic and Pat from GoCardless, as well as our partner, Adam from Garwood, for taking the time for this. For those of you that don't know, Precursive, we provide a range of applications that are native to the Salesforce platform, actually. And so our customers are typically using us to improve their resourcing, project management, customer onboarding, and professional services delivery. So lots of topics around improving time to value, operational efficiency, employee experience, and these types of things. Our white paper was heavily influenced by our experience of selling and delivering SaaS solutions into a range of sectors across SMB, mid-market, and enterprise. And we have a proverb that we use internally, which might be a bit tongue-in-cheek, but it kind of sums up how some of the best companies are thinking, which is we don't want to spend a lot of time and money acquiring customers only for them not to realize value and in turn churn, because the financial impact of that failure is pretty significant. So this is actually a quick example from a company that sells a SaaS solution in the HR tech space, where they typically have an average order value of $50,000. Their head of professional services and CFO actually shared this analysis with us of what the impact of a 1-month delay would be, with delays on revenue, profitability, and of course, cash flow. So there's a lot at stake. So delighted to have the guys join us and share some insights. I'll hand over to Adam, because I know that for you, these types of numbers, Adam, would have probably been giving you nightmares back in the day in the consulting organizations you ran, because those numbers always tell a story.
Yeah, absolutely, Jonathan. And, you rightly point out, the impact on revenue and cash flow. And those are, really important factors. But for me, the real impact is there on profit, because, revenue and cash flow is a phasing thing, and it's important, but really profit is very difficult to claw back. So, especially if you're on kind of fixed price delivery. And of course, it's all the more compounded nowadays with the accounting legislation that's come into play in recent years, IFRS 15 and things like that, where actually your onboarding and your implementation directly impacts your ARR. So from that point of view, really important that you get timely and successful delivery. So how do we do that? How do we do good execution? So from a pre-sales point of view, what's really important nowadays is that pre-sales and delivery work really closely together pre-contract win. How can they do that? So standardizing onboarding packages is one way. Having a set of packages that vary based on the software modules that you're implementing or the size and scale of the client is really important. Obviously, there are some tolerances to scope that you can build in, but also it's really important to be very clear on where scope can creep based on your previous experience, and to identify those areas early and kind of address them. Agreeing a cadence for delivery, to engage in pre-sales. So as we've said, really important that it's not just a pre-sales chuck the contract over the fence to delivery once the contract is won. So at the right point in the opportunity, delivery do need to come in and work really kind of hand in glove with pre-sales. Even more important if you've got a particularly complex implementation or onboarding program, because delivery need to do the estimation, and they need to make sure that estimation is correct. So really important that those guys are working together. And one of the things I think helps drive success in that area is that there are really, as well as standardized onboarding packages, there are really well understood kind of bill rates and cost rates, and then everyone's working to the same data effectively. And delivery have to own the effort estimates that are coming through. Drafting statement of work. So again, really needs to be done kind of pre-sales and delivery together. Ultimately, the statement of work should be owned by delivery, and it needs to include things like assumptions, dependencies, risks, and issues. One thing that's often kind of missed off these statements of work is a really clear view of what the commercial model is. Is it time and expenses? Is it fixed price? What is the billing profile? These are kind of really important things that if are often not captured, and if they're not, they can cause issues further down the line. Forecasting margin and PS revenue, just really crucial. So I touched on the point about having standard bill rates and cost rates. You need to know pre-contract signature what your projected revenue, your projected margin is going to be for the project. And that needs to be tracked throughout the life of the project. You need to be held to account on on those numbers. So obviously having standard bill rates and standard cost rates are really important. Some organizations do give some flexibility to the sales team in terms of varying the fee rates, the bill rates within certain tolerances. That's absolutely fine. But what I would say in that situation is that you need to keep the cost rates absolutely fixed, and the delivery estimates have to be owned by delivery. And that way, if the bill rates do change, you can immediately see the margin impact on that, and that can be signed off by all parties kind of pre-contract signature. And then finally, transition to implementation and onboarding. As I said before, really important for pre-sales and delivery to work hand in glove throughout the kind of opportunity development phase at the appropriate time. But that doesn't mean you don't need to have a formal kind of transition once the ink is dry on the contract. You absolutely should have that, and you should have the knowledge sharing culture to make that work. No one wants to be kind of dragged around for emails and things like that. So you need to have a culture of knowledge sharing and the right tools and repositories to enable that knowledge sharing when that transition happens. Brilliant. So we've contract. We're kicking off with the client. What's kickoff meeting? That's absolutely key. And that should include senior members of the client as well as the project team. So I think brilliant. So the first thing is to recap the business case. So this is kind of the classic consulting technique of playing back to the client our understanding of your problem, of your challenge. Don't ask the customer to repeat it, but tell them what you understand, and you may find that things have changed over time, and that is really important to know at this stage. Set the right altitude with the attendees. So as I said, you're most likely going to have senior attendees at this meeting, including the project sponsor. This is not a detailed planning meeting. What this is about setting the high-level expectations, building the relationships at a high level, building confidence in the approach and the high-level plan. So make sure you pitch it at the right level. Defining roles and responsibilities for the project on both sides. So this is really important. Who's going to be your project manager? That's who are going to be involved in workshops. The sort of commitment that you're seeing from the client side on that is really important and gives you a really good insight into how seriously the client is taking it and how well the expectations have been managed of the investment in time that the client needs to put into the delivery. This is critical. Understanding how the customer defines value and what their outcome is. You really need to understand the customer's why. Too often delivery teams focus on the what and the how without understanding the why. If you don't deliver on the why, if you don't deliver on the outcome, you're effectively building in churn into your onboarding process. So it's really, really important that you understand that. And finally, I touched on a high-level plan, but a high-level plan needs to be backed up by a detailed plan. And the detailed plan needs to have the key dependencies between both you and the client, and needs to be a living document. It can't just be something that's agreed once and put on the shelf. It needs to be kind of maintained throughout the project, otherwise you won't know where you are in terms of delivery timelines. And finally, agreeing the cadence of meetings. It's a hygiene factor, but it's really important. What meetings are we going to have? We're going to have daily stand-ups, weekly project management meetings, maybe monthly steering committee meetings. Really important to get those in diaries early on, particularly steering committee meetings when you've got senior stakeholders. They're time poor, difficult to get their time. Better to book those slots early and cancel them if you don't need them, rather than try and get people in a room at short notice. And then once the project is kicked off, how do you make sure it's successful throughout? Well, I'm a big fan of the weekly status report. This doesn't have to be War and Peace. It's a very light document, but it's covering what we achieved last week, what you're going to planning to achieve in the next week, key risks and issues, any dependency tracking, any missed dependencies, and just generally a good document to inform the weekly project management meeting. If you set it up correctly, that's no more than 20 minutes, half an hour a week to produce that. And the value that it brings is, kind of well justifies the investment in time. Scope management, really important. We touched on it in the first section. Scope is something that will change over time. It's inevitable when you're in and understanding the client's business. There will be gaps in the solution. There will be areas that haven't been thought about when the statement of work was being put together. That's just how it is. But what's really important is that you know, through the weekly PM meetings, you're very open with the client about this, and you give them options up front. No client wants to be given a surprise, you know, too late down the line when they could have made a decision early on. So be really, really open, talk to the client about those things, and let them make the decision rather than presenting it as a fait accompli. And very closely related to that is change management. You know, a client may not have the right framework to make a decision about whether they want to increase the scope, which may in turn have an increase in timelines and costs as well. So what you need to do is you need to help the clients create a framework for change management and a change management process. That's really important, and especially in large enterprise clients where actually there may be differing opinions in the client about whether a change in scope is required. So having that process and that governance is really important. And finally, and possibly most important of all, is don't forget the non-functional aspects. So things like environment planning, data migration, security and permissions, and of course, kind of business change and adoption. These things are all critical. They're not necessarily front of mind because everyone's focused on getting the shiny new functionality that they've been shown. But actually, those things will derail a project if they're not planned for and tracked really carefully.
Great, thank you very much, Adam, there. So we've got a time for question and answers on that section there. We've already got one in, but just to remind, you can use the Q&A button at the bottom and you can ask questions throughout. Please make sure it's directed to all speakers, otherwise I won't be able to see them or ask them. But we've got one here that says, what needs to be considered with regards to professional services revenue exactly? Quite a weighty question, but how would you like to answer that, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously different organizations will have different revenue models, but I think most SaaS product businesses would look at the services element of the overall contract with the customer. So there'll be a kind of a licenses element, but typically there'll be some kind of services surrounding the implementation of that software product. And in most cases that will be kind of called out separately and shown as implementation services or professional services, and that is typically the revenue that you would consider to be services revenue.
Great, thank you. I don't see any more questions coming in there, so I'll move on if everyone's okay with that. But thank you, Adam. So now we're talking to Mike on workforce science. Mike, take it away.
So mine kind of comes into with the way that the last year really changed professional services landscape for us. So a little context on that. I spent the majority of my time in the UK, and then my family was here. So it was just a lot of bouncing back and forth. And on March 6th of last year, I packed my bag for 3 weeks because I thought it was going to be a very serious event. And so 3 weeks I was planning on being back in Denver and then fully being in person in London for a in-person meeting that I had in the beginning of April. And, I'm sure like most of you, I came up in professional services with people that said things like, you can't have any engagement with people unless you're in person. You have to facilitate the meeting in person. You have to have a whiteboard in the room and everyone has to be in attendance and nobody can dial in. That changed really quick. And so now I've been back in the States for over a year and haven't been any in-person meetings. And so it wasn't just immediately unlearning everything we've been taught, but it was, addressing other challenges that we had to figure out quickly. So, everyone knows that, working remote, I think in the past was like, oh, I think maybe somebody went out for a couple too many drinks last night, so they're working remote today. Well, that changed really quick and we had to make our employees comfortable. And it wasn't even just us being understanding or sensitive of the time. It was realizing that remote work meant we had to shift the way we bonus them and the way that we incentivize them from just monetary to a nice chair, a standing desk, helping them with their Wi-Fi, helping them with utilities, because they were all there at home the entire time. And that we had to really make a focus on employee morale in a way that we never thought we would before, not just taking them out to, a pub quiz night or doing that remotely, but it was essentially walking the room remotely, and actually checking in on people and making sure that our human capital, because that is our business, was okay, not just in their work life, but in their personal lives. And so it became an even more personal business for us. With virtual delivery, kind of like I said in the beginning, everything before was in person, and now all of a sudden it wasn't a choice. I had solution architects that were like, I don't know how we're going to run these meetings that we had planned in 2 weeks. And there's a little bit of trial and error at the beginning, just trying to find the right platforms. But I think since everyone went through it, our customers immediately adopted to this new way of working and this virtual delivery. And that challenge actually changed the way that our company now, and actually our customers, perceive the need for some of these in-person meetings moving forward. It doesn't necessarily have to be an in-person, as long as we can still get together face to face. And then a new ethos. The bottom line, something that changed at our company was, yeah, that bottom line is okay, but it's not okay if our employees aren't all right and the customers aren't all right. So the shift to check in and bring people together, like it wasn't just at our level. Our customers have actually, our partnerships with customers and our personal interactions with our customers have actually become stronger. So it's very employee focused now, and not just bottom line. And the ethos at our company behind that is that if our employees are happy and they're successful, that our customers are going to be happy and successful, and that will drive the bottom line, not just the amount of billable hours that we're charging. So that leads into this, the new metrics. Yeah, billable time isn't everything. And what we found over the course of the last year is that our employees have shown much more productivity, not just with working with our customers. They've taken on new educational challenges, and we've tried to make more time to support that. We've tried to turn their downtime into other creative activities. We've learned more about their outlets outside of work. And so that's kind of become a new metric for us of what are you doing, not just for our customers, but what are you doing for yourself? Like your wellness becomes a metric within the company. So employee happiness and well-being is the biggest indicator of our success, kind of as I said before. And I think we've always said that, like I think a lot of folks have said that, but now more than ever, it's really what we envision as the way forward is really our people and how they're doing are, the new metric and not the billable hours. Methodology, that capacity planning took on a new life as, like we realized that we can actually do more and work better as a team than having just a group of individuals. So by that, I mean our delivery approach, like in the methodology and the way we deliver has always been, get the boots on the ground. You have one team, and that's changed into more flexible teams and team members that have an understanding of not only the customer, but the project, and not necessarily just dedicated people. So the methodology's changed. We have a lot more, for lack of better words, tag team, that at the end of a day, it doesn't necessarily mean the end of a day, because as we're global and we're using Zoom and other technologies, we're actually able to deliver faster. And then quality of life. I think I said this a little bit above, but not just from our side, but our customers actually demand that our employees are happy, because they know how fatigued their employees are. And I think the coolest thing is, like never before, I was joking with our other panelists, but my kids have gone back to school, but I think everyone became a little bit more flexible with, hey, so what? There's a kid in the meeting. Guess what? A cat jumped in the monitor. Who cares? I'm calling from the car. It was more so, how's your quality of life? Are you making your obligations? Are you doing what you need to do? And are you taking care of yourself? And that's like our client and our work teams have become more of that, like an overall business family. It's not an us versus them, which I think it has been a lot in the past. And so we're taking that money that we used to make and spend on events and travel and putting it back into our employees now, which I think a lot of our customers are too. And like through all of that, we had this like epiphany because I've worked with I can tell you some of the, like, for lack of better, best artists, architects, like people in the world. And that is not always the best hire. Finding the team player is the best hire, especially in this day and age, and not the Da Vinci. And by that, I mean, people that are genuinely, genuine, and they find quality in talking to people and being a good team player and supportive, not just of, our internal team, but of our customers. I would much rather have 10 of those than one of the very best skilled people. And now more than ever, I think we found that just because there's a lot more, there's a lot more need for us to connect, and especially when we're apart. And I think that shows to our customers. They'd rather have team players than the absolute best person in every single role. I mean, we all strive to be the best, but so, I've kind of talked about how we've been primarily focused on our employees and how we've shifted our own paradigm from a professional services perspective. But what we've also noticed that through all of this, even while we were trying to figure out what to do, because we can Zoom now, because we can get in touch more frequently and we don't have to travel, our customers actually expect us to deliver in a shorter time frame than we did before. Some of that is also because our teams are dispersed globally, and we can do handoffs or stand-ups at the end of the day and handover work and continue going. So it does turn into a longer development cycle, like leveraging more in a daytime than we have before. We've actually found that this remote work actually makes working agile a little bit more focused, and it's better. Customer teams are actually willing to embrace things like Kanban boards now and daily stand-ups and increased communication because it's there. We're all using these technological tools that before the buy-in was a little bit harder to get, and now it's actually just we have to use it. So it's actually made us positioned much better to say we're going to try a more agile methodology with your company, even though you've done waterfall before. And the reason we can do that is that we put a team in that will not only deliver fast and then use these agile tools, but if they're going to fail, one of my architects before had said, like, we want to fail fast as we can. So if we are trying something new, or we're building an MVP, or we're even trying to get something out, we want to fail as fast as we can on the things that don't work, so we can focus on the things that do work. And last is that, the new mindset, like, we can't predict the world. I think none of us, going back to my original statement, is that I was expecting to be back in London after just a couple of weeks. We cannot predict the future. So our customers have realized that too. Let's iterate on what we have right now, and we can worry about that long-term down the road. But that old methodology that we delivered in professional services of waterfall and let's plan absolutely everything out, it doesn't work, because the plans get thrown out the window very quick, as we've all seen in the last year. And then so overall, with our team being a bit more cohesive and well taken care of ever before, we're actually able to exceed customer expectations kind of more than I ever thought. And I love that services has evolved from where I started, and challenging. So these 4 areas, challenging the status quo. Our customers are challenging it. We are people can work from anywhere and be productive. The way that we did things before COVID, they don't make sense at a project, a person, or a company level anymore. Like, of course, we want to get back together, but I think we're starting to see a much more happy balance between work-life balance, and companies need to be able to respond quicker and get engagement. And we're more focused on productivity than we are on just setting up a whole bunch of work. Let's be productive at work. Business outcomes determine every amount of success. So I know that this has been talked about for years, but truly now, if companies don't know what they're trying to achieve, then they're not going to do it. So if you understand a project is going to save 10 million pounds or give customer service agents 20 minutes back in their day, which translates to a monetary savings or increased CSAT scores, that brings every requirement, every priority in a project together. Oh, it doesn't fit one of these metrics, we're not doing it. Throw it out. service as a service. So our customers love our services. They love us running projects, but sometimes they want short bursts and they want our service kind of as a service. I don't know how better to describe that. It's not staff augmentation. It's just us providing a quick integrated team as a service with trusted people that we have so they can get something done quickly. And then the last thing on my slide is that, and this is actually the coolest, is that I've just seen more integration with our customer teams than I ever thought would be possible. You know, there's always, at least from my perspective, there's always been a little bit of an us versus them perspective in professional services. And I'm just not seeing it anymore. The people that we work with on the ground, we see more collaboration. We are invited to more meetings with them. We're just treated more as trusted partners and as more of the family. Our success and our happiness of our employees translates to their success and vice versa. So I think that's been really one of the greater things that I've seen. I think it's going to be a big change moving forward, is that we're going to see a lot more integration between project teams and with the customer and with our own teams. And that's kind of what I have from an Atlantic perspective.
That's great stuff there, Mike. Thank you so much. And it leads on nicely to our final section that we'll do with Pat, which is more the customer-centric view. But if anyone has any questions, do type them now. And in the meantime, I'd like to have Jonathan. I think you've got a question for
Yeah, I had a question for Mike. So services as a service in the world of professional services is kind of like a religious experience, right? For some. And so you've talked about before to me about the fact that, you know, the customer's getting much smarter about bringing you guys in to deliver some sort of expertise that allows their team to focus on higher value work. How is that something that you see accelerating? How does that manifest itself in your world? Why is that happening?
Yeah, I think it's almost an integration of teams where we may be leveraged for a very specific piece of functionality because they want to focus on their core business, but it doesn't mean that does not mean that they don't want to support the solution. So it's almost, we're brought in, run this, kind of step back, let us handle it, see if we've got it, and then move on to, you know, whatever the next thing is. And there's just a lot more integration between the teams. So we see, you know, a lot of times we'll see they don't necessarily need a project manager. They don't want a staff aug. They want us to still come in and provide a service. So we might send in an architect. They might manage the entire project. We might send in an architect and a few consultants, but they're still looking for the same things that we would provide in professional services, which are our expertise, our perspective, best practice, and everything else, not just to take direction from them, but to continue to challenge and do things the way that we would normally do it, even though we're not managing the project per se, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's another question that's come in, which is, are you finding any issues with keeping customers engaged in the remote meetings, especially on things like training and testing?
Yeah, you know what? Surprisingly, so we just had a go live for you know, an enterprise company that's global, multinational, and I am telling you, it has actually made the facilitation of those meetings much easier, especially with training and testing. The caveat to that is it has to be very clearly succinct, and the meeting, kind of what you would expect anyways, but meeting agenda, what they should expect, and then actually delivering on it all have to be done. And if you don't have that, if people are coming in, they have no idea what they're doing, you're going to find the same issues you would find with in-person trainings. But I'm just finding it, and from my team too, that we're having an easier time getting in touch with people, especially with tools like Slack, where a lot of the clients that are using it and we're using it, we're inviting them into our teams, they're going into their teams. So it's just become a little bit easier, I think. Yeah.
Well, it dovetails quite nicely into Pat, into your world, right? Because part of what you're going to be talking about is this success as a service. So over to you, sir, because it's a fascinating topic.
Yeah, and really interesting stuff from Mike there. I can definitely resonate with a lot of that internally, but sort of also externally in terms of the sort of flexibility. So thanks for having me, and nice to meet everybody virtually. So I'm going to talk a little bit about success as a service, and I don't necessarily use that phrase tongue in cheek. I actually mean that's sort of the path that we're on at GoCardless. And you know, if we look at the title of today's session, you know, traditional services is dead, or at least is evolving very rapidly. I don't think any industry sort of exemplifies that as much as SaaS over the last sort of 5 to 10 years, let's say. And the need to deal very differently with what success looks like for a customer. I think the days of individual engagements and the days of sort of one team leading to another team in somewhat of a disconnected way, certainly in SaaS, are gone. You know, we're looking at life cycle here. We're looking at sort of pre-sale, post-sale, post-renewal, upsell, expansion, all as one journey. And at GoCardless, you know, one of the areas that we really try to focus on is building a brand externally that delivers on that and makes customers ultimately the kind of masters of their own destiny, and allows them to engage as heavily or as little as they choose, but not to make it a sort of a forced engagement. And when we look at, you know, how we engage with our customers, you know, the concept of customer first for us is a sort of a mantra right now. And you know, it's really starting the relationship around outcomes and starting the relationship around, you know, what the core components of that are going to be. And, you know, trust, inspiration, advocacy is at the heart of the customer success function at GoCardless. And really, we want to make sure that we're provoking, we want to make sure we're supporting, and ultimately we want to make sure that we have a culture both internally and externally that sort of exudes that. And everything that we do really sort of, you know, complies with that and gives customers the comfort that they have a team that knows them fundamentally, that's actually able to engage with them at whatever stage of the journey that they're at, in the right way with the right people. And a very significant element of that is really creating a sort of a brand or a concept or a sort of an ethos, I guess, that centers around an ecosystem. We kind of like to call it internally that there is a customer ecosystem, and that ecosystem has many different component parts. It's not linear in the concept of, you know, the people that you're going to engage with. There's many different behaviors that will be driven. There's many different stages that the customer will go through, many different people they'll touch. But ultimately, it's for a singular goal, and that goal is whatever the customer's outcome is defined as. And again, that changes, that sort of goes up, down, many different directions. But I think starting from outside in, which is what we're always really trying to do, is critical. And it's kind of hard to do sometimes because, you know, metrics are inherently internal and are the kind of things that we look at and the kind of things we judge our teams on. But fundamentally, all metrics are pointless if the customer walks away, or if the customer is not being engaged with in the way that they see fit. And ultimately, they want a joined up service. They certainly do from our perspective, and that's what we're seeing more of. But internally, you know, we have to make sure that we embed this in how we engage and with how our teams engage with the customer. And I heard Adam mention earlier on, you know, about pre-sales and the handover to integration implementation. You know, and it's a really sort of pertinent point for me when I joined GoCardless. You know, one of the early areas that we sort of mapped out very explicitly was what is a successful pathway. And by pathway, I'm not talking about a particular segment or a particular section of the life cycle. I'm talking about all of the life cycle, from the point where they engage in the select phase right through to anniversary, and hopefully many anniversaries passed. And you know, one of the main elements that we tried to bring into this was again the outside in, outcome based thinking, which is, you know, at each stage of this pathway, you know, what are we expecting our customers to experience? So forget about metrics, forget about, you know, playbooks, forget about everything. Like when we walk away from the select phase and a success team engagement, what do we want our customers to feel? How do we want it to resonate with them? And you can see the kind of mindset is really embedded in this pathway. And it's really important because one of the areas that I found hugely with COVID, particularly over the last year, is, you know, the need to really put the customer outcome and mindset at the forefront of every engagement we had was just accelerated by multiples of, you know, 100, 1,000. All of a sudden, SLAs didn't matter anymore because you were on the phone with a customer who potentially was about to lose their business. Like, you know, SLAs don't matter in scenarios like that. Customers remember scenarios like that, and success has to be diverted really in terms of how we engage in those ways. And as we've built out that value pathway to really give the teams the consistency into how we engage, we've also realized pretty quickly that we need to some degree productize how we engage, because not all customers want the same thing. And you know, that's a truism, absolutely, but it's also hard to deliver on. And the route we've taken at GoCardless is to make sure that we accept that that's the case, and we accept that that's the case, and that we can deliver depending on what level the customer is at and what stage of maturity the customer is at. So, you know, we think about our engagements in terms of, we give customers tools, we guide them, we show them how, and you know, we've productized those services. And when I say productize the services, I mean that across the board. So we're not simply talking about a customer success manager or an onboarding manager or a PS engagement. We're talking about everything. So from pre-sale support right through to early access to ongoing engagement to strategic guidance, you know, the offers are inclusive, if you like, of any type of engagement a customer is going to need. And that's why we kind of go back to that success as a service. The customer in the GoCardless world is really subscribing to a suite of you know, products fundamentally, each one of which allow engagements depending on what level they're at. And should they choose to want more or should they choose to want less, then that's completely the customer's choice, which it should be, and which we're driving towards. And as we sort of evolve the packages, the products, the customer success products, the way we're sort of extending and expanding the pathway is to start to also think about it in terms of maturity. I think when we think about outcomes, sometimes if it's inside out, we think about it in very binary terms based on what we want the outcome to be as a partner or a supplier. It's very difficult in many cases to keep a North Star in terms of what the customer wants the outcome to be. And in some cases, customers are not where we want them to be, or indeed the outcome changed. So where what we've started to look at implementing now, and we've begun this process, is concept of an overall customer health check at the end of an onboarding process. And really that health check is a kind of a traffic light system, I guess, to see where the customer's at, what they need, and to set them on a path depending on how they can reach the outcome that they've initially signed up for as quickly as possible, but being realistic and practical in terms of what stage they're at, and then allocating the right services against that. And again, I don't speak of this in terms of professional services or implementation or customer success. This is an engagement, and that engagement is really tailored, and it can be dialed up or dialed down depending on what that need is. In terms of what those next steps and those pathways look like. So, you know, an example is, you know, educate. We have many customers, for example, where their biggest blocker is educating internally in terms of expanding the product to reach the outcome that the individual initial buyer was looking for. So we'll support them on that. Some of that might be a professional services style of engagement. Some of it might be a customer success manager who's literally living on site for 3 months and working with the center of excellence. But again, we're not separating these things. We're not saying that you have to talk to this person to do that necessarily, or that to do that. We're trying to bring it all together into a sort of an engagement that works and that works well. And to sort of sum this up, I guess, you know, what we've started to see, and really our hypotheses thus far on this, and some of this has started to sort of come to fruition, is around, you know, 3 real pillars for us. I mean, the most important one is to accelerate customer time to value, and being really clear about what that looks like, but more importantly, being clear about what the customer sees that as, rather than our own sort of expectations or, you know, interpretation. The second is expectation. You know, as we engage with customers now, particularly in SaaS, and as I've experienced it over the last 10 years, you know, there is an expectation that this kind of service, success as a service, as it were, is there and is clear, is simple, and is something that they can basically have to choose from, and that kind of is up to them as to what approach they want to take. And then finally, you know, from a deal advantage perspective, you know, we have seen our internal sales teams, again, back to Adam's point about the pre-sale side of things, and the point about that Mike made around sort of a them and us kind of scenario. You know, we're finding that this concept and these engagement packages and products are really being driven hard into our sales environment, and you know, our sales team really are positioning these as kind of value adds, like really genuine value adds on top of the platform and on top of the actual software. And it's a great thing to see, because it's the ultimate, I guess, collaboration. We provide value to them, they do the work that we need them to do for us. And provided we have everything in place to be able to check that everything is as it should be, which we have, in a very light fashion. It's super collaborative, and customers, ultimately the most important thing is customers see it as a joined up process, which is ultimately what I'm judged on. So that's sort of at a very high level, how we see this. And one of the final points I'll leave it on is what we found certainly over the last 12 months is that the ability to sort of pivot and to evolve with customer demands and customer requirements, within a model that still has a very fixed kind of North Star, I guess, in terms of what we're all here to do and what we're all here to deliver on, has proven incredibly valuable. I, like Mike mentioned earlier on, my early stage experience, with professional services per se, was obviously very fixed and very binary. What we're seeing right now is, the impact of a professional services style of engagement in the world of SaaS can come in many different forms. We have engagements, for example, that have retained a customer that may not necessarily have any billing attached to it. But we have a customer for another 12 months because we got involved, we did the kind of work that they needed to do, and because of that, the relationship was recharged. Again, not necessarily from a revenue point of view, standard or traditional, but from a SaaS perspective and a lifetime value perspective, incredibly impactful. So it's really kind of interesting for me, just trying to evolve that and think differently, and quite frankly, position it differently within the organization in terms of what the impact of a professional services style of engagement can have. So
great, thanks a lot, Pat. And we've already got the questions coming in, so I'll start asking those. So we've got from David: is there any relationship between the service package and delivery method, like self-service versus P2P, or is that variable by customer need?
Yeah, that's variable by customer need. What we've tried to do is provide a suite of offerings that are really based on how a customer wants to engage with us. I think one of the kind of mistakes I certainly made many times is trying to get deep into segmentation and make presumptions about certain customers and price points and linking ACV to the ability to potentially get involved and buy a premium customer success product. And what we found is it's quite the opposite. We have many customers that have that exist in what we would maybe classify as small business, who have actually bought up the chain in terms of customer success packages. So we haven't sort of limited anyone's ability to do that. And that's kind of the ultimate goal for me, is I want it to be aspirational. I want customers to look at this, and despite what they're actually maybe paying from an ACV perspective, want to evolve faster and evolve quicker, and know that if they have this level of engagement, that's going to happen. And it's kind of a win-win so far for everybody involved, because we're not prejudging, Jonathan, someone's ability to pay simply because of the segment that they exist in or what their initial, commitment might be.
Great. And we've got a further one from Paul. Do you use different methods like tech versus human touch to deliver success to different types of customer, for example, SMB versus enterprise?
Yeah, we do. I wouldn't say it's necessarily different types of customers. My kind of medium to long-term vision for this is that it's almost like a pyramid where you'll have digital touch access to everybody, like irrespective of the segment. So for example, if you look at any one of those products, the ability to access our help center, we're evolving now our customer hub very rapidly to provide scale, customer success to over potentially 60,000 customers. Like, everyone has access to that. So it really is more around they sit side by side in the medium term, but for now, predominantly, if you engage with us from an essentials perspective, we have a hybrid digital touch, with customer success managers, but who have a different sort of requirement, a different engagement. The key is how we're positioning that is very deliberate, very specifically. And customers can choose. I mean, ultimately, the main thing is that they can choose and they know what they're getting, and that they're willing to sort of work with that.
Great. And this is addressed to you, Pat, but I think this would be a good question for a round robin for everyone. Have you seen any relationship between service, take up and retention?
I can quickly answer that. Not yet. What I've seen, we've launched this probably 4 months ago now, maybe 3 months ago as a product suite. From a take-up perspective, it's surpassed all expectations. Our attachment rates are through the roof in terms of the deals that have come through the pipe with these packages. I'll be able to come back here in 9 months and tell you in most cases if they actually made the difference. So my hope is that they will. But from an attachment rate perspective and a demand perspective, it's just been really, really interesting to see how well positioned this has been in a very short space of time. So my hope is that that will translate to engagement, which in turn will translate to growth and retention.
Fantastic. And we've got one final question here before we switch this to sort of fireside chat, but keep asking the questions. Do you have any advice or hints or tips from experience on how to convince sales and pre-sales to enable professional services to get involved, ideally earlier in the sales process? Again, anyone feel free to chime in on that one.
I'll let someone else answer that one.
I think Adam, you're probably well positioned there.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Just went on mute because my doorbell went, so apologies for that. Yeah, sure. I mean, in a nutshell, incentivize sales and pre-sales on profit, not just revenue. I think that's a really important, bit tongue-in-cheek, but really important. But also, certainly with the pre-sales team, I've seen some organizations where, pre-sales people kind of run through on the onboarding and the implementation as well. Not necessarily for the whole project, not necessarily full time, but they kind of see that project through, in a certain way, and that kind of builds empathy between the teams, and kind of really, gives them a really good insight as to when they're, talking to the next customer in the pre-sales stage, how the discussions they have and the expectations they set can really affect delivery, kind of further down the line.
Yeah, I'd also comment on that. I think you have to have a very open conversation between sales, pre-sales, and PS about the when, right? So some organizations, they actually want to get professional services involved much earlier in the process. In the last webinar that we had, John Harrison was talking about, from the VP of Services at Sage, was talking about getting people in services team at 30% through the deal cycle, which for other organizations, they would look at that and go, wow, that's really early. But I think, what we see very good companies sort of realizing is, like, if we can have that open and honest conversation about, like, the when and how far can sales and pre-sales take it, and when should PS be coming in, do it through the customer perspective. If you look at that value pathway that Pat presented, the customer mindset was one of the key streams in it. And I think from a customer perspective, if you're going to buy something, one of the key questions is, if I sign this contract, what happens then? What does that look like? How long does it take? How are we going to realize the value? And therefore, the sooner that you can give the customer that comfort in the pre-sales process, the better.
I think I don't know about Mike and Adam, but one of the things that I've always found is, I think I'm going to say it, it's probably kind of contentious to some degree, but I think sales folks in many cases get a very bad rap when it comes to this, because I think, I obviously their incentivizations help, right? There's no question about that. And any good salesperson has to, ask the question, is it going to impact quota? If they're not, that kind of worries me. I get that. But I think what I've found in the past is, I think traditional engagements, maybe 15, 20 years ago, always felt sort of almost like, I won't say the police, but it was kind of like, it was more, you can't do this, as opposed to, how do we make this happen? And what I've certainly seen over the last number of years is, the more the sales organization, particularly at GoCardless, see the value in terms of either incentivization, but equally deal acceleration and credibility, the more easier it is to get involved. And certainly, I keep saying to my team, like, you have to earn the right for that. You have to earn the right to be a trusted partner, whether it be customer success or professional services. And that's made a very big sort of mindset shift for us, insofar as, I've been very explicit. My job is not to be the police. My job is not to find holes in deal quality or, deal cycles. My job is to make them better and make them close faster. And they have, we have tangible examples now where having our team has made a massive difference. So I think, that plus using those as case studies within the org, it's amazing how good news travels fast. And one deal closed that had 20% higher ACV because of services. Man, it's like a megaphone in the sales org. All of a sudden you have a queue, and then your problem is it's not that one person who made it happen. You have to make it the entire team. But it's a lovely thing once it gets going. But it does take a little work. But I think that's definitely a takeaway that I've seen had a massive impact.
Great. We've got a couple of minutes left, so this will probably be the final question, but I'm sure the guys will stay on for 5 minutes if you've got any further ones. And Paul's referred this to the payments world, but I think this applies to everyone on the call today. There seems to be an arm wrestle over wallet share, right? So have you seen an increase in your own wallet share based on the focus on success?
Yeah, I think, from our side, I know that we have. So I think customers are wanting to, well, at least our customers, their success immediately translates into other projects. So like we've one of our customers that we just went live with on a large service cloud implementation immediately took that to, all right, let's the success there, let's give you guys a crack at our quote to cash processes. Let's give you guys a quote, crack at all of our partner relationship management now. And it's just immediately blown things up for us. So it's some of that, I think, is that they understand the way that we work now and the way that we approach their problems and solutions, and they trust us. So they're like, well, if they can do this, I think they can do that. Let's crack the door open. So I definitely think that success, especially now, there's a bit of stability when you find somebody that does it for you the right way, and they're a little bit more willing to open the wallet up within their own account. So yeah, more than before. Yeah.
Great. So as we wrap this up, Jonathan, is there anything you'd like to add to tail end this webinar?
No, just to say thank you to everyone for taking the time to join. And Mike has offered to play the drums for us. Mrs. Dohrmann is going to rush in and take him out for it, supposedly. So yeah, I thought you said you were going to play us out. No. No. Thank you for everyone. I mean, it does take time and effort to. Will the recording be available? Yes, it will. It'll be sent out. Thanks for everyone for taking the effort. Obviously, the contributors, Mike, Adam, and Pat, it's hugely appreciated. I think what you've shared kind of shows this blurred lines between the world of services and success, and I think that's only a good thing. I think the most modern organizations now, customer success is inspiring the world of professional services, and I think to your point, Mike, to Pat's point, professional services is kind of modernizing and being less about the no police and more about, yes, how can we enable these outcomes? So I think that's going to be a super interesting space. It's kind of like how sales and marketing over the years have learned to work in a more symbiotic manner. The worlds of customer success and services are doing that as well, which is super cool. So, and thank you to Mr. Burnell, Robbie, without whom these awesome sessions wouldn't happen. So back to you, sir.
Not a problem. And yeah, thanks to Adam, Mike, Pat, and yourself, Jonathan, for taking the time. And thank you to the audience for asking great questions. As Jonathan said, the recording will be available. To those who register, you get special treatment. As mentioned, this content is spawned from our most recent playbook of the same name, but we have plenty of content to keep you occupied. From our other two playbooks, one, how to scale in SaaS with customer onboarding. Second one, managing projects remotely on Salesforce. Those are all free. We've got some white papers, which you can find on our website as well, but I also direct your attention to any upcoming webinars. If you're on this webinar, you'll obviously get notification that these come up, but in late April, we'll be showing you how traditional services delivery is dead. It's now being wrapped up in the Precursive wrapper, and show you some of this in the product, the new world of services delivery, and how we share this unified approach from PS to CS in our tool. As well as in May, we'll be moving on to the customer onboarding and CS side of things by decoding our annual benchmark report, which has proved to be one of our most popular pieces of content. So thanks again to everyone. All this is available at precursive.com. And if you've got any further questions, I'm sure the guys will be willing to stay on for a couple of minutes if you want to ping them now. But have a great day or evening or midnight, as one of our assistants is currently in New Zealand doing this. Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you.